Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to show how you can create a composite graphic for a sports event which integrates a flyover view of a stadium leveraging Google Earth. So before we get to that, though, I just want to invite everybody, have any comments or questions, please just post them and we'll try to get to everything live here on the show. Also, if you would like to join us live on the show, we do have a call-in number that's in the show notes and here on the screen. So if you'd like, just click on that link and somebody from the studio will get you on with us. All right, so let's dive in. And what I actually want to do is I want to show you the output here so you could see exactly what this would be like. So this could be where you're in, a broadcast booth and you want to talk about the game that's coming up. And what we can do, so let me sit here, is I can go and send a signal out that will read a XML file, populate the graphics for our next game that's coming up, go to Google Earth and drive it to a specific view at a specific location. And then we use desktop capture, and we use that for a very specific reason. vMix is desktop capture to pull that moving image in. And this would work where I could go and, pick any other stadium or venue if I wanted to, and this would just be the same type of thing. I'm pulling all that information out and populating this graphic through multiple assets. So let's start with how we get into all of this. And I'm going to sort of click out here and let's go back to, I want to go over to Google Earth and look at the browser for a bit here. So Google Earth is at earth.google.com. And it actually is really an incredible site with a ton of capability and functionality baked into it. But there's a few things that I think are really important for what we want to do on today's show. And the first is that you can go in and you can put pretty much any location that you'd want in. But since in this case we're using sort of stadiums and arenas, what I'll show you is the process by putting in an arena. We'll go through this. Now, Michael Quist actually had mentioned before the show that his team from Denmark is in the European Championship Handball. And that's actually, it's being hosted by Germany this year. I did a lookup. So I just know one of the arenas over there. So we'll use that as our example. So I know one of the arenas that is doing this is the Mercedes-Benz Arena. Mercedes-Benz. And that's in Berlin. So what I did is I just put in what I wanted and searched for it. And so now you can see this whole thing is moving and zooming in. And so right now I have a two-dimensional view and I have this whole blurb over here on the side telling me everything about this. But so for this example, we don't really want the blurb on the side. And the other thing we want is if you look down here, there's a little button that says 3D on it. If I click this, this is what gives us that view that we get. And so what we are doing is this URL that we have right up here, very long, but this URL will get us exactly to this location with this view. So we need to remember this. So we'll copy this, and this will be one of the things that we'll do. If we want to drive Google Earth, we will need to take and copy that information, that URL information, and we're going to paste that into an XML file that we'll use to say, for this game, it's these teams at this arena, and that should sort of get us part of the way along. The other piece, and this is very important. I mean, I think it's critical that we respect other intellectual property as we go along. So if you look down here, there is something that says this is the data attribution. If you use an image from Google Earth, it is required that you provide this attribution on screen at the same time that you are showing this image. And that's something that we did in the video. At the bottom of the video, we actually, for each one of these locations, we had that attribution information. And so if I click on this attribution, this opens this up. So I could actually take and just copy this information out. And we actually include this in the XML that we have set up for this. We include this attribution information as well. So it's very easy once you find basically the arena flyover view you want to make sure that you copy all the attribution information and then include that in the XML. So this is really the part that deals specifically with Google Earth. So next I'm going to jump over and start to talk about how we have the vMix preset set up. But I think we have one other comment here that I want. So it's Sean Tolan. Sean, hi. Thank you for joining us, Sean. He said he saw the live description, went over to Google Earth. So yeah, so that's great. And I think once you start to use this, there's lots of different ways you can think of doing that integration. So thank you, Sean. So let's jump into vMix here, and I'm going to go through some of the things that we want to cover here. So the layout that we have for this has different segments. So the first one up here, these first three inputs, what they do is when they are used to basically hide or show the Google Earth portion of this segment up here. So, and let me explain why. And I'm going to do that by sort of putting the game display. Let me see. I'll put the Google Earth piece right over here that we have. So if you look over here, if I drive this and say, I want to go to a different game. So we'll go to my favorite team here. Let's see which. So if you see in the beginning of all of that, there was, so there's a Google Earth flash up. There was the resolving image as it sort of gradually added more detail. And that whole part, looks kind of rough if you're looking at it in the context of a broadcast. So while that is going on, like while you see all of that information over here, which is, pretty much a, straightforward exercise, what we're doing is we're saying, I want to cover that up. And then after I wait enough time for it to be filled in, then I will show it. And the way we're doing that is we have as an overlay, and I'm going to go into that as we get further down, I have a mix. And if you look here, this is mix 2 in the UI parlance. And so I either have an overlay to cover the stadium or I have transparent. So if you see, if I cut this, you'll look over here, that's doing that overlay there. And it's either showing it or not. So that's the first element that we have in here. And we have to just be able to say, okay, when I'm going to a new location, cover it, do what I need to, wait a little bit for it to come in, and then uncover it again. So it just makes that cleaner. So the other piece over here is we have this as a simulated broadcast booth. This would just be your announcer's camera, your play-by-play announcer's camera. And, you're going to be able to switch back and forth to them. This next input is the desktop capture. So we were looking at, should I do this through NDI or should I do this through the desktop capture? And the advantage to doing it with the desktop capture, is that you can actually specify, I want to capture just this app. I want to capture Google Chrome here. So, if I shrink this or do stuff, if you look over here, you can still see that as I move this around, it's getting cut off a bit. But if I swing this over from side to side or like shift it, this guy here and this guy here are solid. If I were to use the NDI desktop capture, it would just be capturing this full desktop and not the application window. And this gives me a little more flexibility. So when I have this all set up and even, go F11 to get where I want, now none of this is getting changed. It's just when the interior content of that window changes that you see an impact here. But as long as this is just moved around, that doesn't change. And you can even put it, I believe, I could even just put this under something. So if I were to drag my vMix and sort of cover it, it's hard to see, but you can see none of that is impacting what I have over here. So this just gives you a safer, cleaner way to do this. So hopefully that makes sense for why we did this, but that's why we're using the desktop capture baked into vMix and not NDI. So then we're just doing, like we did before, we do sort of our layered graphics. So this is the background, this sort of red and blue background we have here. And then the next is the game display. This is where I have all my layers. So if you look here, I have my background in there. I have my Google Earth, and I have my stadium title, which is all of the elements you see here. This is the stadium title, which is one of the titles we have that we're coming up to, that has the name of the stadium and the live from. I have the Google Earth, which we've talked about. And all of these things are sort of sized to fit. So in Google Earth, I actually, it's about 60%, and I've, shuffled around positioning for where I want it, and we've cropped it to take all the extraneous things out of it. But that's how we basically assemble this. So I have all of these elements in here, and then we have these two titles. This is the stadium title that we just saw layered in here. The other is, these are the teams that are playing. And if you sort of go through here, give me a second. The one other thing before I switch off is when I transition out, I make sure I take down my overlay, because the teams are coming in through a zoom overlay. And this is stuff we're doing inside the scripting. But if I were to take this off, you sort of have it come from the sort of almost behind the stadium and pop out with that zoom view. And this is a title that we're populating from within the script. So it's a fairly straightforward thing. The other thing, if you look, is that when I start to pull off the overlay of the stadium area, that seems to sort of come out from behind it. So visually, if you look at it in a full context, that can be very, very clean looking. And, I have the ability in here to do the same, so that I can do the zoom on this transition into cover things here. So when this goes away, you can actually make it so it looks like it's going down and then the other one's coming out at the same time. So that's the kind of impact we were going for with that. And these are just two GT titles that were laid out with other image assets that we put together. But all of this is going to be driven out of XML. So let me pop around here a little. So here we go. So before I get into the XML, we just have a few more people have joined us. So let's see. So Michael said, "Oh, that looks great." Yes, and I just wanted to make a point, because it's really easy when you get caught up in doing productions that you don't think about all the assets that you're pulling together and what other people have to do. So thank you for highlighting that as well, Michael. I appreciate that. So we have WV Video Productions. Will this work with Google Earth Live View? This is a paid service. So I am not sure exactly how Google Earth Live View works. There is a Google Earth API, which is sort of in beta that you have to sign up for. And we've used that before, and we just reconnected with them again prior to the show to make sure that we had access to that if we wanted to do something. But I'm not sure if this will work directly. But again, if there is an API or a way to drive this, there's definitely possibilities for how all of that could go. The other thing, and I can come back to maybe in the post show if you can hang around for that. We'll talk a little bit about how you can use Google Earth to create other types of assets and sort of videos and stuff. So that's in there as well, and that's in the Google Earth application. I'm not sure I have it installed on here, probably not, but I'll talk about it anyway. So that's something else you can think about for different ways to leverage this. So, and we have Marco. Marco, hi. Thank you for joining us. Always good to see you here. Okay, so let's take a look at how I set up the XML. And we have this basically as I just have in this case 3 different games that we could have active. I could have any number. I just put 3 in. And so the structure of this is that I have elements, Team A, Team B, and Stadium, and those are inside each game. And so for Team A, we then have attributes that are set up. We have the name of the team and the helmet image that we're using to place on screen. And we do identically for Team B. We have an attribute name and the helmet image. And that's what we'll pull out inside the scripting to populate the team's title that we were showing over in vMix. For the stadium, just to do it differently, so we can sort of look at all the different options. We just have these under the stadium as a set of child elements. And so we have the stadium name, basically what we were doing up here with an attribute, we're just doing down here as an element. We have the stadium URL. So this is what I mentioned when you're in Google Earth and you go to the location and get it sort of framed up the way you want it, you can copy that URL and just paste that into the XML. And that's what we are reading to drive the Chrome browser to do what we want. And then this is the last part that we mentioned. We have the credit that goes for this image here. If you click on that data attribution, we just pull that information out and we said displayed stadium map includes data from, and then we listed all the contributors to the content that was on that map. And so we have that all there, and that's something that we show at the bottom when we go through the title. And that's everything we have for the stadium. So in total, it's a fairly compact type of framework here. I could have this for all my season's games. I could set this all up and just know exactly. And so you could assemble this different ways. So for instance, if you basically just needed to sit there for today's game, I need to know, which week I'm in and which teams are playing. You could have all this other information, their official name, helmets, all that stuff, as well as whatever stadium it's at. That could all be separately stored. We just did this, for today's show, so it's sort of a simpler view to, having all this information. But if you were doing this for sort of a team schedule as you're going through a season, you may want to reorganize this into discrete elements that you're going to be able to use and just have a very simple XML for whatever broadcast you're doing. So we set this up. We have repeated blocks of this game element, and we could have as many or as few as we want to run this. Inside the script, we take care of stuff to make sure that we have a valid set of data and are pulling that in. But this is all we're doing from the XML side. So let me just, because Michael has just put this up. So he's saying that how did you show the property information? So inside of the graphic that we overlay. So if we sort of look at this, if you look down here at the very bottom, I can't really point to what you have on screen, but it says display stadium map includes data from Google. So that was all there was for there. But I'm gonna just put up another one because there are ones that have sort of more detailed information. So so you can see here, this one now says it includes data from Google and Landsat Copernicus, and the first one is actually just reading the information. This includes data from a lot of different locations. So Google, Landsat, Data, SIO, NOAA, US Navy, NGA, and GEBCO. So we have that baked into the title template as something that we put across the bottom. I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure, if they needed it at a larger font. We tried to put it at, I think this is a 16-point font across the bottom. So, it's legible without sort of being, drawing focus away from the content, but it's there. And I think that should cover, our requirement to make sure we have that attribution on screen. Okay, so let me jump in. Good. So I think we're set here. So let me actually go now and look at the script that we're using for this. Sort of go back to the top. So this is going to, it's a very straightforward script. So we're just going to sort of go through it. There's a lot of stuff that we've covered. It's basically built on things that we've been covering this season. So as we always do at the top, we declare all the variables and make sure we have everything set for that. So the way we are going to be working with this is we are going to create a node list from that XML file of all of the games. And then when we select which game we want, we're going to pull that out of the node list into a single XML node and use that to extract all the specific information. How do we know which game we want? We're going to be using our dynamic values. So dynamic value 1 is where we're going to store game 1, 2, 3, however many we want is the value we want. And we're pulling that out. We're going to store that in the variable active game. And then this is all the information that we're pulling out of the XML file. We're just pulling it out as strings, but that's all defined there. Let's see. So the next thing I did, and this is because we're using external assets. So I have a place for the helmet images and I have a place for the XML files. So you could have these in different locations. You may want to, so you can actually set this up and say, where do you want this? This just means that I'm not going into the code piece and editing that in sort of individual statements inside the code. I'm just saying anytime I want to do something with an image, I'm using image folder with the name of the image to construct the URL that I'm going to pull stuff from. So this just gives me our baselines for that. And then we're going back into very familiar territory where we're opening up the vMix XML, loading that up, and we're getting our dynamic value 1 out of there. We're converting that to an integer. And what I'm doing is I'm doing a try catch. So if, and there's a reason I did this in one statement. If the dynamic value 1 has nothing in it, or it has a non-numeric value in it, doing the cint is going to fail. So this try catch lets me know that there wasn't a real value in there that I could use. And so when I do the catch, all it says is, okay, if there isn't a value, set it to 0, which is sort of the first in XML. If you're going through an index of XMLs in a node list, it starts at 0, 1, 2. So that's how that works. So we set it to 0 and end the try. But if it has something in there, we'll take and pull it out. So that's sort of the first thing. So that gives us the game that we want, and we know that now. Pull it out of vMix. And now what I'm doing is I'm opening up the XML file. And so this is something we've done before. I create a file stream and it basically, if you see here, this is the folder I had the XML in plus game title.xml. So that's how I'm pulling this all together. And then I am just doing this as read mode, and then I load from that file stream into my XML node list, into my XML document. And then from this XML document, I'm selecting all of the nodes that are game, and I'm creating my node list here. So that's basically what I said, as many games as you want, put them in, you create a node list. Next, we're going to now combine the game I selected with this node list to pull out the individual node. And so I'm checking now. I know I have a number. So that's the first thing. So if that number is less than 0, or that number is greater than the count of games in the node list. So I'm saying if it is, because I converted it to an integer, I know it's going to be like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or negative numbers. And if it is less than 0, I know that's invalid. And if it is greater than the total count, then I know that I should just set it back to 0 and be done. That way I just go back to my default, the first game in the list. So this is where I start with. This is not 100% proof. I mean, if there was nothing at all inside the XML, you could have issues. But assuming you're doing this with the goal of getting this right, you shouldn't have any real problems there. So you have the next thing is, as I mentioned, I take the active game and I use that to pull out the individual game node from the node list. And we have that here and assign it to game node. And at that point, as we did previously, we are pulling all of the elements out of that XML file and placing them into string variables. So everything we're pulling out of XML is string based. And the way we do that is we basically navigate the XPath from sort of where we are, say, go to game node and go inside that game node to stadium name and pull the inner XML. And that's just the text that's inside that. And we pull that out. So if you remember, that's how we did everything on the stadium side, because we did those as elements. For the team names and the team helmets, we used attributes. And this is why I wanted to make sure I could show the two different ways, but we're going into the single node. And for that single node with team A, I'm just going and getting the attributes and the attribute named name and the attribute named helmet image. And that's what we have there. And we're pulling that out and putting this in. And with all this information out now, then we start to manipulate what's going to go out on screen. So the first thing we do is we want to update the information that's in our titles. So we have the two titles, the one with the helmets facing each other and the team names, and the one with the stadium info. So we do the stadium info updates first. And so we are basically saying we're doing set text. We have the input is stadium title, which is the name of the input inside of our vMix preset. We have selected name. That is the element inside of our GT title. It's just a text field here, and it's called name arena and credits arena. And so when you do this to set as it's a text element, it's .text, and we're just putting those values that we read from XML and assigning that. So that's updating my GT title for my stadium. Very similarly, here we are updating the GT title for our teams. We're pulling the team names in. Again, these are just set text, so very similar up there. For set image, again, another function inside of vMix, another shortcut function. It's into the team's title this time instead of the stadium title. And we're just going through, and this is the helmet team A and helmet team B, as opposed to .text when you're inside of a GT title text element. It's .source if you're inside of an image element inside of a GT title. And that's how we put all this together. And as you can see here, again, we're using the image folder, which we defined at the very top. And this is why I'm doing it, because if I change that, I don't want to have to go in and change all of these individual lines of code. I can just change the location I'm storing stuff in one place, and that all populates through. So at this point, we have everything ready. So all of the titles are set. We know exactly what we want to do with driving Google Earth. And now we're going to actually start to put stuff on screen. So the first thing we do is I turn around and say, I want to make sure in this case that the team's title is off, because if somebody put it on for any other reason, that overlay input 1 is what I was using. I'm just making sure that I'm turning that off. And this is when you're manipulating titles, the shortcuts, there's a few different variants. So you can sort of do overlay input 1, which I think will just toggle on and off. That's one shortcut. You can do on and off, which will just turn it on and turn it like a cut. And you can do in and out, which will do for sort of the transition in and out, which will leverage, in this case, the zoom. And that's how we set up for overlay 1. We set it up to use the zoom. If it does a overlay input 1 in, it'll use the zoom. And if you do overlay input 1 out, it'll do the reverse zoom for that. So we turn it off, and now we cut mix 1 to say cover up the Google Earth element that we have on that title. Actually on the composite with the title. And so it's covering that up. And then this is a brand new function that I want to talk about, and it's process start. So what it will do is it will take and try to execute in your operating environment whatever you have in here. So this isn't specific to browsers or anything, but what this lets me do when I say execute an HTTP command in Windows, it's basically going and saying, okay, I have to open my default browser and display it. So that is what this process start is doing. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute, because there's one thing you have to keep in mind when you use this, but that's how we do that. So when I get to this point, I've covered it up. I'm telling the browser now, go here and bring in this new stadium URL and display that in Google Earth. And then what I'm doing is I'm basically, fading on this game display. So that's this whole, if you look in that whole image, this is basically all behind. So you could have your broadcast booth talking. When you do this, up to this point, your broadcaster, play-by-play analyst is still talking. And then when I go and do the fade game display, that's putting this image now as my main output, which says, today's game is going to be, and we do a sleep for 200 milliseconds, for 2 seconds. And that gives the browser time to catch up. At that point, we take and zoom the title from Mix 1 off, and we do overlay input 1 in, and that's remember I mentioned that, and we put that team title in, and that sort of zooms that from the center and displays it out. So this is basically everything that gets done, and this sort of controls how all that paints on the screen, but everything else was fairly straightforward. So that's everything here. I mean, there's a few things. I mean, I'll go back to the vMix for a second here. The one thing that you have inside overlay, if I open this, you can come back and for each one of your overlays, you can talk specifically about how you'd like it to go on screen. Is it full screen? Are you going to shrink it? What effect do you want to use to bring it on screen? What's the duration of that effect? All of these things. So you can set all that up. So when I do just go in or out, that actually will leverage whatever is set up for that numbered overlay. And you have the 4 available overlays for this type of thing. So that's basically all we did there to make that happen. And when this whole thing goes together, this is what you see. These are just, so if I go over here, these are just the GT titles. So in the this case, it's just live from, and then the stadium. And in this case, these are the helmets and the names that we're painting, but this versus is sort of already in the background and semi-transparent. But this is everything that we've done. So this is how this all really gets assembled when you see it from that other side. So hopefully this makes sense and was useful. But you can also think of this in many other ways. So, we'll talk a little bit more about, other use cases, but this is something that isn't just sports related. You could use it for other things where you may want to, there could be debates going on and you want to cover, the venue that the debate's in or show things like that. You can use it to drive things that you may be going through something which is, basically almost tours where you want to go through segments of a college campus and different buildings. This stuff would all work for that. So lots of different use cases for the core capability. So before we go to our post show, let me jump over. I think we have a few more comments here. So Bill Mew, Bill, always good to see you. Hello back and Happy New Year. So thank you. So Michael, I was asking, in the post show, if you have time for it, could you go over how you made the graphics and your thoughts behind the design? I like it. Okay, I'll talk certainly about how I did all of that. So, definitely go over that in the post show. And let's see, and we have Automation. Good to see you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I definitely appreciate it. All right then. So. I think we're going to call it a wrap for our main show, and we'll jump into our post show. And we'll talk in much detail as anybody likes about what we did here. A few things. We're sort of in our post-season 4 season, so sort of if you even look at like the season numbers, this is show like I think it's 32p. So it's just post-season shows. We're not going to be doing shows every week. So like next week, we're going to be actually on the road working with clients. So we're not going to have a live show next week. Not sure if I'm going to be able to post anything up for that, but we should expect to be back live in 2 weeks. So a week from next Friday, 2 weeks from today. And we'll do another live show then. But if you can't hang out for the post show, I want to thank you for spending the time with us this afternoon here and in our studio. And I also, I want to, be safe, be well. I know we've had harsh weather in a lot of different locations, so be careful as well. And if I don't see you in the post show, I'll see you next week. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our post show here. So Michael's saying that Denmark is actually playing against Sweden in the match right now. So Michael, I will if you want to drop off and catch that. I'm a big sports fan myself with American football, so definitely understand wanting to watch your teams there. So let's jump in though to Michael's question about how. Sort of the design thoughts behind the graphics and what I did with them. So when I think of graphics, I'm always trying to, I think of them very much like sort of those onion skin layers. What goes on top of what, and how does that sort of enhance and bring out what's above it? Because ultimately you have to have some sort of focus. So in doing this graphic, I wanted something which sort of framed the sides, which is why I picked something with sort of diagonal lines, because I didn't want it to look boxed. I wanted to create some sort of movement in it. The other thing you'll see here is actually, let's see if I can bring the output here and show this as the full screen. That may be, so I had this as sort of an image sitting in my back set of assets that I've had from different services I've used, and I like that. And so because this had that angular side, I wanted to sort of mirror that. It wasn't an exact mirror. I could have rotated this and gotten it so these all sort of lined up more exactly. So yep. But that was what I did. So let me switch back to my vMix here, and I'll try to make this a little bigger because I just see if I can't really. This is about as big as I can get here. So in doing this with this versus thing, that gave me the angular side, and I said, if I were doing this, and it was like really critical, I probably would have rotated these things a bit more to get them so they were sort of parallel in this sense. So everything was sort of at that same angle. It was close enough for what I wanted to demo in the show. And so I have this as my backdrop, this red and blue diagonals. Then I have this placed in as the layer behind that. And this is all feathered on the edges. So that just makes it sort of blend very cleanly into here. And there's a slight bit of transparency in that. The helmets have no transparency, and that makes them pop a little bit more. I think, and I'm trying to remember exactly what I did when I made these. These may have a small bit of a drop shadow to create separation under them. These are just images that I created in Photoshop. And sort of I took that. And then what I did to make these names, since they're bigger names, and this actually can give you a good contrast. Here, this is just white with a small border on it. And the border on this is matching pretty closely to the blue behind, but it's different enough that it creates some edge. And that's what I did there. But you can see with that solid white, it tends to sort of be more in your face. But you can see here, I filled these in with a gradient, so a slightly darker to a pretty light gradient going up. And that's how I filled these, because I thought that blended in more with the helmets. And by doing the darker to the lighter, I thought if you're looking at the name, the lighter sort of guides your eye and gets you up into to look at the helmet. So that was the general thinking behind sort of how I put this together. And I had this big space up here that I really separated to use for the stadium image. And the other reason I liked using this, team versus team, is because it had these linear lines here, which sort of went in the horizontal, that created a base for showing the graphic up there. So it sort of logically fit there, or I would have had to have probably added some other element with the diagonals to just sort of, whether, some sort of bracketing or framing to sort of draw you into that. But that just gave me another angle. And I just had a thin sort of creamish white border to make it pop out and put an edge around it. So that was sort of the logic behind the graphic setup here. So I know this is not really like high ESPN quality graphics. It's just something, that I giving you a little thinking into how I think, how I would assemble something image-wise to create that kind of effect, and the reasons I made certain decisions. So hopefully that covers what you were looking for. So let's see. I think we have, Bill Corky. Bill, thank you for spending the time here. I always appreciate that. Good to see you back, and give my best to everybody out there. So, and let's see. Michael's saying he's looking forward to see the Green Bay Packers versus the 49ers. I am too. So we'll have to see how that one plays out. It could be a good game, but it's going to be really tough for the Packers. The 49ers have been very, very good this year. So let's see. I'm glad you like the graphic we put together. I mean, I try to do stuff that I'll put it. I wouldn't be embarrassed by, so I'll sort of put it that way. But because we're not doing this, as a professional production, I'm willing to make more compromises. But I think one of the things that probably for most of you that do this consistently is that you're going to build a toolkit of assets and things that go together. And you're going to start to template a lot more. So once you have, like, for a season of football, you'll create your graphic and have these elements. So you can spend more time because that investment sort of will go to every game you're going to cover throughout a season. And I think that will give you, once you have that sort of as your mindset, then you start to build these things and you create sort of a brand and a look. So I'm not doing that here because I'm not trying to promote my streaming capabilities for professional sports or anything like that. But if that was one of the ways that you were driving a business, part of the graphic design will be something that promotes yourself as well. And it doesn't mean that it's an obvious promotion. It's not like you're putting your logo everywhere, but it becomes something that is sort of visually compatible with your logo branding colors, but also creates a look that's unique for you. So when you are showing a game, that people can just look at a snap of what they see on the screen and go, oh, this is so-and-so and this is their stream. And I think that's important. So when you think of graphics, it's not just the technical creative aspects, it's also sort of the marketing creative aspects. How are you creating a brand that you can leverage to show, so when people see it, they know it's you and they appreciate the professionalism that went in, and that's worth the extra investment. For me, this is something I'm sort of using one time and putting together. So, but I think the same philosophical thinking, sort of, well, I won't say philosophical, but the same approach, the stepped approach to sort of a desired outcome and the way things would blend and mesh. Those sort of principles would still apply. And I'm sure there are graphics people out there that are, far more talented than I that, could give you better guidance. But that's basically what my approach was. So, all right. So do we have... Yeah, so I think this is probably as I was looking for this at this topic, I was really thinking of all the different ways that you could use this beyond sports. So, like I mentioned, you could use this thing for, especially now that we're talking about, like, we're coming into the political season for a lot of different countries, certainly here in the United States. So these things, especially what we have in the States, is called primaries, where you have different candidates go from state to state, and they try to convince people to vote for them so they can become the nominee that runs. And because that, you do things which are in a lot of different states, a lot of different venues. And so leveraging something like Google Earth to create that more dynamic element can be very, very powerful. And that can be true. You could be doing, a rock band that you're following around and showing, each new city they're playing in, and then the venue they're playing. So lots of different ways you can leverage this. But where I thought this could be really interesting is it gives you kind of that drone look, and especially when you're doing things for non-professional sports. I'm talking sort of like, the middle school, high school level sports. If you're actually covering that, this can add that next level up. And it doesn't have to be a fancy stadium. It could just be the field at the high school that you're covering. Though I'll be honest, I've seen some of those stadiums at high schools, and they are pretty impressive too. But yeah, so it just means that you can connect more with the audience that would be viewing that. So if that's a local high school and their games, people are going to be connected. They don't need to see a big stadium. When they see the field and the school and that sort of hovering view over that, I think that can be a really cool asset as well. And this is something that you can do without having to get sort of a drone operator and permission to fly within, certain distances of people and all the other things that go with that. So that was some of the thinking there, that there are lots of different use cases outside of sports, but also, in the smaller tiers of sport that gets broadcast, for people that will just feel more connected with what you do and a different way to stand out. So that was just part of the thinking behind this. All right. So if we don't have any more questions, we'll probably wrap up. As I mentioned, sort of in this postseason where we're doing more periodic shows and not trying to go every week, we are working on a few different things. So we're trying to get all the new assets for season 5 built together, trying to sort of pull through a list of topics. All the topics that you've shared with me for things you'd like covered, I'm actually going to do a post in the Streaming Alchemy group that sort of talks through, what I'm looking at from that and different things I think I can do. But so there's a lot of things going on in the background. We also have some things that we're going to want to put together as videos. So we have a couple of cameras that PTZ Optics has sent that we want to do in-depth videos on. And, we may do a wrap-up show with that, a live show so people could ask questions. But so we're trying to do production on that. And we also had YOLO Live send us a YOLO Box Ultra. And just started looking at that. We're starting to put together basically a layout for production to cover that, but some really cool stuff there as well. So we got a lot of different things going on in the background, in addition to running the business, the neural net business. So just a lot going on. But I just wanted to give you the sense there's a lot of motion, even though you don't necessarily see it all on the front end. So just know we are focused on producing content, on getting ready for next season, and we'll keep doing shows through this postseason on as frequent a basis as we can to basically keep this connection. I'd be honest with you, every time I don't do a show, I really miss the conversation we get to have, and I look forward to when I'm back here and able to talk with all of you. So Michael said. Just quoted, says, even as a certified drone pilot, I can't do it so steady, and so doing the stream as a one-man band. So yeah, I mean these are sorts of things you get some advantages, and yes, it does require more crew and more work if you are doing that through a traditional drone shot. So this gives you another way to add that sort of cool look to it. All right then, everybody. So. As I mentioned, we'll be back in 2 weeks, we believe, and we'll have a new show then. But until then, be well, be safe. See you. Take care.